Welcome to Coming Home, Survive and Thrive in Homeschooling. I am Christine, and here is part 2 of the interview with Penelope and Rodney, teaching business and financial skills to your children. When I first spoke to Penelope about interviewing them, it came from my own experience of not having the education about business and finance and just getting to that invisible wall of having a great idea, wanting to do business, and then not knowing what to do next. After speaking to Penelope and asking her about their background, how they did homeschooling, I recognized that their experience is so important to get out to homeschool families. You have the privilege in your homeschooling life to adopt the experience and wisdom of those who have gone before you. I'm going to read an excerpt for you from the Moore's book, Minding Your Own Business. It will become familiar to you as I read because you've had time to think about the interview that we did last week. Constructive, skill-building, entrepreneurial work builds children's self-confidence, creativity, and self-control, and does it more quickly. It is the most dramatic and consistent cure for behavior and personality problems. If you give children authority to manage your home to the extent that they can accept responsibility, they mature rapidly and naturally. Make them officers in your home industries. There is no more certain key to happy home education or other schooling, regardless of the institutional level. We've seen no one fail, rebel, or burn out. Begin small. Start your children to work when they start to walk. Add freedom as they accept responsibility. No cash allowances. Let them earn their way, helping you make or grow and sell cookies, muffins, bread, wooden toys, vegetables, service lawns, babysit, etc. By age 6 or 8, many can run businesses. And so, let us just get on with part 2, teaching business and financial skills to your children. So right from your earliest days, when you decided, you took this big risk, it was a big risk, that not only were you going to homeschool, but you were actually going to homeschool in a different kind of way. You formed your own subculture of an already subculture group. But you built on something that you saw had worked, and it kept building and growing. And now you can look back over the years and go, that risk was really worth taking. And so that in itself is encouraging to the modern homeschool family now who are trying to figure out what to do. Because business, I get the feeling it's changed a lot. A lot of it is online now, where you can leverage your time a lot more. So you've now got experience in the more modern way of doing it too. Have you got anything to comment on then with the more modern way of helping businesses to grow for the homeschoolers now looking to emulate what your example is?
Training is a great platform for any of your children like our son who got that helicopter and then bought half a dozen helicopters from China and sold them. I mean, anybody can do that. The platforms are there. Facebook has a shopping site. Google has a shopping site. I mean, buying and selling something, buying a product, seeing something you love and enjoy and know a bit about or can learn about, and then you become the expert in it.
Another way, if you've got very artistic children, could be, for example, Canva is a great design tool. They may be able to produce some amazing things using something like that will be a graphic art thing, or producing posters, cards, pictures, illustrations for people. The principle, I think, that we learnt from the Moores is that if you see that your child is interested in something, really help them to magnify it and to put resources there in front of them. So a very simplistic way of thinking of this would be, if you saw that your child was a real outdoors person, even if you lived in the city with a small garden, if you saw that they would really thrive in having some vegetable production or something, then you would put the money into helping them learn how to build some planters and help them to get the vegetables growing. Maybe they could eventually sell them, or share them somehow with people. Give them from a young age the freedom to do something quite radical like that. You are taking a risk because it may not work and they may lose interest, and then you've spent this money on building these planters, for example. But keep trying, because there will be something that's really, and it will really extend them. At the time, Raymond and Dorothy Moore, the Moore Foundation, they had a really good little publication going with examples of these kind of things that children had done in all sorts of areas that they were interested in.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of initiatives didn't work and it didn't capture the child's interest. So, be aware that you're likely to put quite a bit of effort into something that doesn't come to anything, but it is a step closer to something else. So nothing's lost for sure. And you learn in the process. Sometimes mum and dad thinks it's a great idea.
But the children don't?
No.
But the children want to please mum and dad, so they go along with it. So mum and dad need to really check in that this is a passion of the child or a real interest of the child, not a one-day wonder type interest that they had. We did that several times.
Yeah.
Ended up in a dead end.
That's reassuring. Parents need to hear that. Not everything's going to work, but it doesn't mean that the idea is wrong.
No.
Yeah.
We really wanted our children to love learning, and the way to do that was that they would have joy in it.
And freedom.
We also, then there were two other things. We also wanted them to get on really well. We wanted our family to get on really well and be friends with each other. And then we also wanted them to love God and know that God loved them. But those were our three main things that underpinned the shaping of our homeschooling.
So say those three things again.
So, and not in any order of importance, because they're all equal. It was love learning, love one another, and love God and know that God loves them. I really do believe that we are designed to be able to learn, and it's a fantastic part of life. And, when you dare to do something different, take a risk, it really develops a child. Instead of having to be stuck at the desk all the time in front of your books.
We're not homeschooling for that, are we?
No, we're not. We're not.
See, it's interesting. Elon Musk, who he's looking for to join in his ventures, are curious people. Are they looking? Are they seeking? Are they asking lots of questions? I think that love of learning tends to make you curious for what else.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
The other mention you made of the Moore Foundation, they have like a website people can go to. Is that called the Moore Foundation?
It used to be. I don't know if it still exists. And Moore, by the way, if you do want to look it up, is MOORE. They had a lot of helps.
If somebody wanted to start and pursue the Dorothy and Raymond Moore, what do you recommend?
Well,
go to their website.
Go to their
website, have a look.
mooreacademy.org.
And don't be put off any kind of religious thing there, because they were Seventh-day Adventist, but they really addressed real life. And I think they had a lot of good things to say. Homestyle Teaching, I thought was a good book.
Homestyle Teaching.
Yeah, that was one of the ones I read in the beginning. And Homegrown Kids was another one. That was quite a practical teaching for younger children, how to approach that. So it was all a mystery when we started out, right? So these kind of books were great for us. There was another one, and I know that it has changed the title. I mean, back in these days, it was called Homeschool Burnout, but I think they've got more of a positive title. And that was just stories of different peoples and how they approached homeschooling and how they used this Moore Foundation ideas.
What did you think of that book, Minding Your Own Business?
Yeah, I think that was good. I didn't learn anything really from that, except it affirmed what we were doing.
It's fine.
At the time, I remember reading it and I thought, oh yeah, this makes real sense. We're already doing this. I suppose because we've been in it, we haven't noticed that what we were doing, was that different. And I suppose the fact that there was no one else doing it at the time. So we had no peers, other homeschool families who were doing this.
But it's wonderful though, because the modern homeschool family now can look at the example, and when they're now starting to choose and design their own curriculum and lifestyle, take great heart and encouragement that not only was the risk worthwhile, but they can do this too. And there are people who have gone before who are ready and willing to share this wisdom.
And I think what you just said then is really important, that if you're embarking on their journey of homeschooling, then you really make the call. It's your family, it's your darling children that you're wanting the best for in the world. Create your own formula. Raymond and Dorothy Moore was a good place for us to start. It gave us a grounding, I guess, and encouraged us. But then as we went on, we created our own environment that nurtured the children, nurtured us. Yeah, I think there's a lot of families that we've heard who have started the homeschooling, but they haven't made it their own, and trying to live up to somebody else's standard or be as good as education at school. The thing is, it's a bit of a no-brainer to be so much better, because you can give individual attention to each of your children at least once a week. Well, they're not getting that at school at all. Plus, they're learning all sorts of crazy worldviews from the teachers at the front of the classroom. That's not the worldview of this family.
And I think that wanting to keep up to a standard it's a boundary we set about ourselves, and it's unattainable. It's the educational or homeschooling version of keeping up with the Joneses.
Yes.
And you really need to set yourself free.
Absolutely.
From that.
Absolutely. You love your children, you want the best for them, they're going to learn in spite of you. Just be there to encourage learning and put the resources in place. Use your adult experience and knowledge to open doors for them.
Can I ask you a little bit, going back to some of those business ideas, I was thinking about families who wanted to pursue the opening up their own business. Can you talk about the general idea of debt, the overall approach to it that we have in our modern life, but also do you go into debt to start your child in a business? What do you recommend?
If your child's got $100 in the bank, start with that. Go out and buy a half dozen helicopters, which our son did. He had some money in the bank that he'd saved. He invested it in the helicopters. Now that could have gone belly up and he could have ended up with half dozen helicopters that he couldn't sell. And I suppose at that stage he would have preferred to have the $100, but he didn't. He turned it into $200. Well, I'll tell you a story with the older brother. After they sold the Simply Clever toys, he got a grand idea. And he discovered this platform called Kickstarter where you can raise finance. And so he got onto that bent and he invested his money from after he bought his car, invested his money.
How much did he invest at that point? Because it was considerably more.
Yeah, well, I can't remember the figures now, but...
Well, it was about $8,000.
No, he ended up borrowing $8,000 and this is the story. The money he had actually wasn't enough for his grand scheme. And a family member was willing to lend him some money. And anyway, it didn't work. So he ended up with a debt of $8,000 that he had to pay back this family member. So he went out and got a job and he paid it all back. Yeah, that was a big life lesson. Because he came off the back of Simply Clever Toys and he just thought he was unstoppable. And he discovered he wasn't bulletproof and his good idea didn't actually take flight. So those things happen. But he was in his early 20s then. So rather than going into debt just because you think you need something, you've actually got to think it through and justify the spend. So debt is a blessing, but if you're not counting the cost, it could be a real curse as well.
Do you have any comments to make about debt in the general sense of modern living?
Well, there's good debt and there's bad debt. Obviously, if you're paying rent to a landlord somewhere, you might also be paying rent to the bank and own your house, meaning you don't get kicked out if the landlord decides he wants to sell or put the rent up. So you've got some control over your... So, I mean, that's the way I look at it. To me, that's good debt. Buying cars on debt is not a good debt, because as soon as you drive it out of the car lot, it depreciates. But in an entrepreneurial sense, in the Bible it says, count the cost of building the tower before you start. And in my business life, a number of times I haven't done that, and I've rued the day. I wouldn't look to get any of my children, if I was coaching them as we were, I would want them to fund their own little enterprise. So if that means like they've got a great idea, but they haven't quite got enough money to get that idea off the ground, then we'll go earn some money and delay that good idea for 6 months until you've got $1,000 that you need.
Rodney, I think what you said before was really good. You talked about presenting a business case for money spent, in the business. Now, I think that's a good idea to do with children, because you want them to be starting a business that they are interested in, not what you want them to do, really. That's the key to the love of learning, is you're trying to allow them to develop in the way that they're made, really, for them to provide a little bit of a business case to you about what they want and the materials they need and how they're going to sell it.
Well, that's a business plan.
Yeah.
Basically,
it's to talk to them about that, ask them questions, and always to be not trying to push your own agenda, really, I think, but you can give wisdom too.
I mean, that brings it back to the fundamentals. If you see one of your children has what you think is a good business idea, then sit down with them on a piece of paper and start talking about what the idea is. If you were to start a little business around this idea, where would you want to be in a year's time with it? What vision do you have for it? I mean, I'm not talking about building a 20-page business plan, because all of that is planning. You need to start with some idea of a roadmap, and then you can check in against that roadmap. And of course, in that roadmap, you keep reviewing that roadmap, because on the journey, there's going to be hardship, and it's ending up costing more than you thought. So how do you deal with that? And I think that's what I brought when the boys wanted to get their little business going. Yeah, it actually went way beyond what we initially thought. Selling it for $40,000. I mean, this was 12 years ago. So I don't know what $40,000 is worth now, maybe at least $60,000. Now, for two guys who were 16 and 18, it was like they'd struck gold.
So business is there. It's a great idea. Marketing research has been done. They've got a little bit of money, bit of seed money to get going. Where do you recommend they go to get their initial small amount of stock?
The boys went to AliExpress, so aliexpress.com. And there's also a big sister to that company. It's a Chinese company. It's called Alibaba.com. So first you've got to do your research. You think, helicopters, but then you've got to go and see who else is selling helicopters, what the competition is like, and is there enough margin to be bothered. But when you do find that one thing that you're interested in and you believe there is a room for you, yeah, AliExpress is a good place, because AliExpress does not pay the supplier in China until you get delivery and you confirm you've received it and it's in good order. So AliExpress is a really safe platform for importing stuff. Amazon is a Western priced platform, like Trade Me is a Western price, whereas you go to AliExpress and it's an Eastern priced. And there's a lot of manufacturers in China looking to sell goods. And so there usually is a big margin difference. But also now, you've got a lot of Chinese people selling on Trade Me. Well, they've got all their contacts back in China, so they get better deals than you'll get as a Westerner. But it's all great stuff. It's like, that's a good idea, son. Let's go and have a look on Trade Me and see who's selling that.
I think one of the keys with this example is that these two boys were interested in the thing. So perhaps if you were a real outdoorsy person, camping or something, you might find camping paraphernalia that would be great, that because you would know about it, you'd want to learn more about that kind of area. Or if you were really into, I don't know, flowers or bulbs or something like that, you'd do that.
Well, another example of another homeschool boy who saw what our boys were doing, and he loved electric model trains. And so he found a supplier somewhere in Europe for those and put them on trade meet. And he was doing well.
We've been talking mostly about the kind of entrepreneurial ideas and products and so on. But for some children, they're not that interested in that. So I'm thinking of one of our boys who was a fantastic, intuitive person, I think, about computer stuff. Because he loved relating to people, he loved solving computer problems, and it was easy for him. And so what we encouraged him to do, so rather than get a product-based business going, this was a service-based business. So with a little bit of encouragement from us and showing him that he could do this thing, was fixing computers for people and solving little techie problems for people. And so he put a little notice in people's letterboxes saying what he could do and his price and so on. I remember you, Rodney, telling him not to undervalue himself, and you upped his price, didn't you? And he said, no, nobody's going to pay that.
His hourly rate. Yeah.
And, he got lots of really nice little jobs, and he met people. And because he's very relational, I think he enjoyed that job. So there were two aspects to it for him.
I can remember getting his laptop and everything in his backpack and getting on his push bike. But he ended up buying himself a car, and then he could drive himself to his job. So,
what have you got there, Penelope?
Well, this is a very old book, and I wouldn't maybe necessarily recommend this, but there are lots more things online now and other books available. It's ideas of how to get your children to work at home.
And
so
the title
business.
of the book is?
The title is 401 Ways to Get Your Kids to Work at Home by Bonnie Runyon McCullough and Susan Walker Monson. I think it's got some good ideas in just for little jobs and businesses and things. And keeping in mind that the idea is to get children to learn to handle money and not be afraid of investing it. Show them how the money in a household gets spent. The electricity is not there for free. The water we have to pay for. So there's an understanding of that. And your supermarket bill. I was aware of all of that when we were teaching. So it's real life training, which is equally as important as bookwork, which is equally important as service, which is doing things for other people when not expecting a reward. So, you can teach children about saving, you can teach them about spending and sharing and so on.
Well, also the boys paid towards the internet because they were using the internet a lot. Well, we just said there's a little rental which will cover all those things, because they were earning money. And then they actually started, when they were making some good money, they started paying board. They were 14 and 16, right? They started contributing to the finances of the household.
But that's real life, isn't it? It's not all one-way traffic. Can you think of anything that we haven't brought up today that you would like to talk about?
Yes, there's one thing I'd like to talk about. Penelope and I were working together as business consultants. Then we had 2 children, and Penelope's heart was really back in the home. So she went home, but here's this woman working at an executive level, dealing with business problems with clients and then going home, working with a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old day to day. And it was a lifesaver. Homeschooling for Penelope was a lifesaver because now she had a new career where she could engage her intellect and build systems and look at curriculum. And so all the things that she was doing in business as a consultant, she then started using all those skills at home. And I think that's what happens with a lot of women in the workplace. They feel they need to get back into the workplace, and sure, you don't get paid to homeschool. So as a team, husband and wife, you've got to decide that the sacrifice of that second income is something you're willing to make, which we decided we were, and thank God we did, because we would not have the relationship with our children that we had at the time. We have a really tight family. They love popping around here. They include mum and dad in their social event, and we're very much part of their lives, which is wonderful. Well, for me, I go to work every day, and there's 3 of my 5 children I'm working with day to day, and they love it, and I love it. And one of our staff just left yesterday to go and have a baby, and she's had a real turnaround in the year and a half she's been with us, because she saw the love we have for her. And I think it is making a difference to the other staff, because, we work things out. We don't always agree, but we work it out in love. They see that.
I'm glad that you touched on this idea of women coming home. I felt like we entered, or even I entered, a kind of a neo-feminism sort of thing. I was coming out of really wanting to, having been a career woman and wanting to only be involved in that, and really probably not having family and so on. My heart was softened by love, and I started seeing things in a different way. So, Rodney, what you've said, I think, is right, very pertinent to many women now who find themselves in the position of homeschooling, maybe having worked in a responsible position, and now don't perhaps have a vision for where they're going, or with little children, you can't fulfill goals, everyday goals. You've got to really flow with caring for them and teaching them and so on. I found that this whole journey of home education, and also with the business, was really fulfilled me in all that I was missing, having come away from the work situation. And I just loved it.
And it ties very neatly into what I wanted to finish with, in that if you could go back to the young Penelope just starting homeschool, what would you tell her?
Don't worry.
Rodney, what about you? What would you tell the young father?
It's an investment. It's paid back 100-fold as far as I'm concerned. So there was a lot of things we went without, and with the global financial crisis hitting, that was hard. But we all went through it as a family. The children saw that it was hard, and they supported that, and they were there for me and supporting me to do what I had to do. It's an adventure. You've got to come at it with an adventure. You've got to have a vision for it. I don't think it's enough to think, oh, well, I just don't like what they're doing at school, so I'm going to do it better at home. You won't win that one. You'll burn out. Husband and wife have got to be both committed to it and both share the vision for what you're doing and why you're doing it. But yeah, it's a grand adventure. So this is one of the adventures that we took. I had a business meeting down in Wellington. I don't know how it came about, but we thought, well, why don't we do a road trip down to Wellington for 5 days?
It was because we were studying the New Zealand political system, and we wanted to go to Parliament investigate all of that.
And Te Papa had just opened down there, so we wanted to see that as well. So we had this wonderful 5 days. We didn't have to go to school and get the kids out of school and give it a note and a reason why. We just did it, and we had a wonderful time. So we did lots of adventures like that, and just on the spur of the moment. Well, let's take 3 months off from homeschooling. Let's take a break. And when we came back after the 3 months, we had a different regime.
Oh, I just have to add, it's really valuable having an outside coach. I remember when we took that 3 months off and didn't do any homeschooling, I actually did speak to, I think it was maybe Dorothy Moore or one of them from the Moore Foundation about that. And she got me to look at what I wanted different when we got back. So she said, put an end point on this, make it 3 months or something, and start looking at what you want different when you get back. So I think the idea of having a coach, I like what you're doing, Christine. You're having an outside input into families. It's really valuable to get someone from the outside looking in. You can get different ideas. You can change your perspective. You can adjust. Very valuable. I highly recommend it.
Christine, there's a business for you.
Thank you.
The homeschool coach.
Homeschool coach. Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah,
that'd be exciting.
You would be good at that.
Yeah, you would be very good at it.
I think
Quick,
so too.
hire Christine.
This was the reason why, right at the beginning of homeschooling, we obviously didn't know how to do it, but we wanted to hire a coach. And we hired Raymond Moore to coach us. And we had phone calls with him in the States back then. We didn't have Zoom or anything. Every 2 weeks, I think. So we could see, here's an older guy with experience. They've had family. They've been through this. They are educators anyway. And we weren't hugely financial because I'd given up my job and we just had one income, self-employed.
But it was an investment. We were investing in our children. That has paid off big time.
Now you actually get to see that because you've got the evidence before you.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many stories out there about homeschooling. Not all of them are good. But that's up to who the parents are and the regime they bring in. But it is you that are going to make it work. So I think it's one of the best things we've done.